You hear it all the time. Steve Sarkisian is a whatever hire, same old Texas. There was actually an anonymous head coach, saying this exact same thing just a week ago. And we hear it all the time on Twitter from rival fans. There's no difference between this hire and Tom Herman's or Charlie Strong. So let's examine these claims. Let's take a look at how Texas's hiring of Steve Sarkisian is similar or dissimilar to previous hires. Make sure to pick yourself up a hat for the new season at Last Stand Hats. Use promo code TexasHomer, all caps, for 10% off at laststandhats.com. Without further ado, let's get into it. First, let's follow the money. Steve Sarkisian's original Texas deal is for 6 years, totaling $34 million guaranteed. Tom Herman's original Texas contract was 5 years at $25 million guaranteed. Charlie Strong's deal was 5 years at $25 million as well. So we see Texas adds an extra year to the contract and about $9 million more dollars for Sark. And of course, there's more perks to being a Texas coach. So you get 2 dealer cars, meaning you can choose any 2 cars to drive, provided by a car dealership that's close to the university. You get 20 hours a year of private plane usage. You get memberships to UT's golf course and members-only clubs, game tickets and game suites as well. Also, you get a $250,000 relocation and temporary housing allowance. Sark will also get a one-time payment of $1.2 million if he's still the head coach on December 31st, 2024. Buyouts are part of the mathematical equation as well. Texas is paying out Tom Herman $15.4 million to bring Sark in. Texas paid $10.4 million for Charlie's buyout to bring Herman in. And Texas paid about $4 million to Louisville to acquire Charlie. So we know UT is paying more for Steve Sarkisian than our previous head coaches, and even adding a year to the contract with this hire. But what about the assistant coaches? Let's compare the first year of Sark's assistants to Tom Herman's assistants in year 1. Sark's assistants earned about $7.3 million in their first year. Tom Herman's assistants in year 1 earned roughly $4.6 million, roughly $3 million less. Charlie's assistants in his final year of 2016 made $4.5 million. And if we look at just last year, Tom Herman's final staff, with a very overpaid Yurcich, only cost about $6.7 million. So clearly Texas is spending more money to bring in top talent than previous coaching staffs. So that's difference number 1. Now, how does Sark's first staff's resume compare to Herman's first staff? Tom Herman's entire defensive staff was with him at Houston. Todd Orlando, Oscar Giles, Craig Navar, and Jason Washington. Todd Orlando was the DC for UConn for 5 years, from 2005 to 2010. Oscar Giles had no Power 5 experience. Jason Washington had no Power 5 experience. Craig Navar coached 1 year in the Power 5 at Kentucky in 2014. Steve Sarkisian's defensive staff has Bo Davis for defensive line. Bo Davis has coached at LSU, Alabama, Texas, the Miami Dolphins, Jacksonville Jaguars, and Detroit Lions at previous stints. Jeff Choate coached at Washington State, Florida, Washington, and was the head coach of Montana State before arriving. Terry Joseph coached at Tennessee, Nebraska, Texas A&M, North Carolina, and Notre Dame. Pete Kwiatkowski coached at Washington and won 2 Pac-12 titles as their DC before arriving. Our least experienced coach is Blake Gideon, with only 1 year of Power 5 experience at Ole Miss, but he just started coaching 6 years ago after leaving the NFL, so the fact that he's already at Texas is impressive. Sarkisian's defensive staff compared to Herman's staff is night and day. Now let's check on the offense. Tom Herman's initial staff had Drew Maringer at wide receiver coach, Corby Meekins at tight end, Derek Wareheim at offensive line, and Stan Drayton at running backs coach, along with Tim Beck as the QB coach and offensive coordinator. Corby Meekins had no Power 5 experience. Derek Wareheim had no Power 5 experience. Drew Maringer had 1 year of experience at Rutgers. Tim Beck had Power 5 experience working at Kansas, Nebraska, and Ohio State. Stan Drayton was Herman's most proven hire, having coached for the Green Bay Packers, Mississippi State, Florida, Tennessee, Ohio State, and the Chicago Bears. Sark's offensive hires include Kyle Flood, who was the head coach of Rutgers, coached at the Atlanta Falcons, and then won the Joe Moore Award for his O-line coaching at Bama. Jeff Banks worked for Washington State, Virginia, Texas A&M, and Alabama, and had won Special Teams Coordinator of the Year. Andre Coleman coached for Kansas State for 5 years and was the offensive coordinator in 2018. AJ Milwee is the least experienced in Power 5, but he was the offensive coordinator at Akron, from 2013 to 2018, and he was an offensive analyst at Alabama last year. Once again, very young guy at only 35 years old. This offensive staff compared to Herman's is also a no contest. Currently, UT is pumping $200 million into facility and stadium upgrades to further sweeten the pot for our new staff and recruits. It looks incredible and it will have all the modern fixings. The university is showing good faith improvements to demonstrate they are ready to win before even landing on our newest coach. So Texas paid more money for Sark over a longer period of time while paying his staff more, who are 1,000 times more qualified than the previous staff, while spending $200 million on facilities, and yet nothing has changed. This current staff has 3 former head coaches, Sarkisian, Flood, and Choate. It has top-tier developers with Sarkisian, Flood, Kwiatkowski, Bo Davis, and Stan Drayton. It has known recruiters with Bo Davis, Jeff Banks, Kyle Flood, Steve Sarkisian, and Stan Drayton. This staff is an absolute home run from a development, recruiting, and a scheme standpoint. To say that this group of hires is not any different is simply untrue. Does it mean Texas is guaranteed college football supremacy? Of course not, but it is a far better beginning circumstance than we had with Strong or Herman. There is a difference, and that's a great thing. I would put these coaches up against any group, and that's what matters. This is a collection of nationally assembled coaches with proven experience in winning conference titles and competing and winning in the playoffs. Sark also lightened the load on himself so he can be a head coach. Sark will call plays, but he selected Kyle Flood for offensive coordinator. Flood can handle this job with ease, and he's a former head coach that sees the full picture. Sarkisian doesn't have to spend the week scheduling every little thing for the offense. He can work big picture strategy. Over on defense, Sark hires a top defensive coordinator in Pete Kwiatkowski. He can run the entire side of the ball for you and do it at a championship level. He proved it with 2 rings over at UW. But if that wasn't enough, you have former Montana State head coach Jeff Choate at inside linebacker, who also understands the big picture and can help PK on any administrative duties or any questions he has. And it's not just the collection of talent, it's how the talent collected can help lighten the load. The Texas head coach job does come with a ton of extra duties that can take away from the field. There's clinics, school events, donor events, political events, Longhorn network and radio appearances, and way more than that. And it's a big job, and I agree it can be a lot if you can't delegate effectively. But Sarkisian put key names in place, Flood, PK, and Choate, who can ensure he doesn't get too bogged down when he's kissing babies and shaking hands. And that's why I like this staff and think they are more than the sum of their parts. The trick for the future will actually be retaining them, because we have a ton of future head coaches on this staff. Right off the top of my head, I can thank Flood, Choate, and honestly probably AJ Milwee. To answer the question, is this hire different than previous hires? The answer is clearly yes. Watch more of my videos here and consider joining as a channel member. As always, hook 'em.